Okay, so we have a new episode of Legends and Leaders, and today it's great to have Miki here. So you're somebody that's been in the real estate space for a long time. I think now over 35 years. You've been behind so many incredible projects. One of which the Plaza Hotel was I think a major one that helped really bring your career to a different point, and that was a huge project. $450 million invested. I think that it was a million square foot development, and now you've taken that and you've been done so many different buildings throughout New York City. It probably would not look the same without the work that you've done. And you've put a lot of focus into residential, but also you're doing some interesting commercial projects too. So I'm excited to have you here and to get into your story.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So how did your passion for business and real estate and wanting to be able to build buildings, and how did this interest just begin in general?
It's actually it wasn't really planned. I was actually attending USC in the West Coast in Los Angeles, and I started to work while I was in school in the university. I started to work as a junior property manager in downtown LA, and just to be able to pay my rent, my whatever, to keep the lights on. And um and then, I guess I did a good job in one of the rough buildings over there, and the partners asked me to look for another residential building. I didn't really know how to, I was studying engineering. I didn't study underwriting and financial complicated models or things like that. So I started to look around. I walked different buildings. I got, I liked one of them, and I came back and showed them, the pictures of the building, and I, basically argued the case why it's a good buy, and they decided to buy it. So after they bought it, I got um, a really nice pay for my effort. And at the time, I didn't have a dime in my bank account. So for me, I said, "Wow, this is nice. I probably should try to pay attention to real estate." And so yes, that's how I start. That's maybe kind of opened my interest in the, finish my engineering studying at USC. At the time, I started to work as an engineer in Los Angeles, and the first Gulf War started in the Middle East, and I felt really terrible being in the US while my family and everyone were in Israel. So I moved back to Israel. And when I moved back to Israel, I it was the time that Russia opened the gates for Jews for the first time to leave Russia. So, most Jews elect to either move to Israel or to the U.S. And all of a sudden, there was a huge demand for housing in Israel when I arrived there. So anyone that had any clue about real estate, regardless if they knew how to build or whatever, there was a strong demand. So I started as a junior project manager in building housing in Israel. And anyway, very quickly did more and more and more, and as went up in positions, and that's how I started.
I'm sure building in Israel is very different than the U.S.
Very different.
What were the biggest differences? It's just the permits and stuff like that take more time or the harder to get.
Well, a lot of bureaucracy. Yeah, definitely permits takes much longer than in New York, for example. Even though people think, oh, New York it's so difficult. And New York is very difficult, but the bureaucracy in Israel is brutal, or was brutal when I did it 30 years ago, whatever. But the other thing at the time, which I realized only when I moved to back to the US or to New York 24 years ago, I realized that I was dealing and running construction projects in Israel for about 9 years. And when I moved to New York, I realized all of a sudden that I don't need to scream anymore. In Israel, the only way, it was always fist fight all the time. And I'm not physically a huge guy, and so but I didn't care. I was, I was tough. I had to get what I had to get, and I was like in a screaming match, almost every day with subcontractors, vendors. They promised things they didn't get, they didn't do it, and I couldn't tolerate that. So, then when I moved to the US, after a couple of days screaming about on different subcontractors, I realized I don't really, not that they are perfect here, but I can get it done without really screaming. So, yeah, those are probably the two major differences in building something.
Mm. So, what made you want to come back to New York? Just want to be in, like, want to come back to the States, want to be in New York. What did you see in New York real estate that you felt like there was this niche opportunity for you to get involved in?
So it wasn't really about that at the beginning. My wife, I met her in Los Angeles when I was attending USC, and we were still dating. I moved back to Israel, as I said before. She moved to just to try it, and we got married in Israel. Her entire family is on the West Coast, and being in Israel, it was tough. So, uh, and then for me, after 9 years of grinding nonstop and working, I'm not exaggerating, 16 hours a day. I got this offer to come for 2 years to New York to basically stabilize some project here. And I said, okay, great. At the time, we had two daughters, and I said, great. We'll be in between Los Angeles and Israel physically, and the two daughters were young, 6 years old and three, and they will learn English, and just to get a fresh breeze of the kind of the tense in Israel daily life. So it was we planned only to come for 2 years, and 2 years now became 24 years, and obviously we established our life here, and yeah, the career took off.
So, how did you wind up getting involved in the Plaza Hotel and the Allowed Group and all of that? How did that happen?
So when I moved here in 2000, I was offered um, to take a position in what I was told is a reasonable size project company. That's what I was told in Israel by the main shareholder of Elad, and I believed him. I didn't do my due diligence when I came to not New York, even New Jersey. There was a tiny office, a two rooms office in Fort Lee, New Jersey. And by the time I had a good reputation in Israel already, um, so I said, oh, what is going on? I thought that I'm coming to New York City, to Manhattan. I'm going to deal with big projects and all of that. I finished a 44-story mixed use building in Tel Aviv already by then, which at the time was one of the biggest projects in Israel. So, for me coming here and all of a sudden there's a tiny office in Fort Lee, New Jersey, and nothing, and really not no activity. And I had two choices, either to go back and continue, or I said, okay, I have 2 years here. Let me try to do something. And for me to do something, I was always highly motivated, very competitive, and passionate about what I was doing. So for me, it was okay. If I'm already here, I need to try to penetrate the market in New York City, in Manhattan, specifically in Manhattan, which was extremely tough because it was controlled by 5, 6 families that were like third generation, and they looked at me like, who is this guy, and what. No one wanted to talk to me, no broker wanted to talk to me, no bank wanted to bank me or us. And anyway, but eventually after a few months I managed to buy a piece of land in Chelsea, New York. It used to be the old Barney's parking lot, and I started the residential project there. And then in a matter of, I would say, 3.5 years, I got involved in, I bought multiple sites, and I had multiple projects in different stages. And then I got I was I started to get a reputation of someone that maybe you should pay attention, really active. If I say something, I do it. I don't retrade. I don't play games. I just do it. And um, and I got I started to work on a deal that what used to be the Mayflower Hotel on Central Park West, which became 15 CPW, which is one of the best, the most expensive residential building in New York. I worked on that about a year while I had multiple development sites in New York, and I was sure that I'm buying it, and I lost it. When I lost it, I was already so fixated on trying to do a project a- around Central Park, because I said, this is such an amazing thing, and there is really nothing new overlooking Central Park. So I was walking around, and I ended up at the steps of the Plaza Hotel. And I didn't know anything about the Plaza Hotel. I grew up in Israel. I didn't know the stories about Eloise and all the history and all of that. What I did do, I called my zoning lawyer, and I said, can you tell me what's the zoning of the Plaza Hotel? And he said, hold on for a second. At the time, they had like the huge books, the huge zoning books, and I heard him like flipping the pages, and he said, very interesting. He said, look, the majority of the hotel is actually in a residential zoning. It was built before the zoning regime. That's why the hotel was grandfathered as a hotel, but the majority of it is in a residential zoning. I said, thank you. The second call was to my banker by that 4 year, 3.5 years after I moved here. I had already a relationship with HSBC, and I said to him, do you happen to know who owns the Plaza Hotel? And he said, well, we happen to have the mortgage on the Plaza Hotel, and because it's a public record, I can share with you. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to share with you. But it's owned by Prince Al Walid bin Talal, 50%, and 50% by this billionaire from Singapore, Mr. Kwek Leng Bang. I said, okay, thank you. And that's how it started. And I said I need to see if I can buy it. It wasn't on the market. I kind of initiated. It took me 3 months to get a meeting. I said to myself, the prince probably is not going to entertain a meeting with me. I was born in Israel. I served in the Israeli army. I didn't know at the time. So I was focusing on the Singaporean billionaire, and it took me 3 months to get a meeting in Singapore. Flew to Singapore, went directly to the meeting, like 18 and a half direct hours direct flight. Went to the meeting. It was supposed to be 1 hour. The meeting lasted the entire day, back and forth negotiation, and eventually we shook hands. And when we shook hands, I insisted to have a one-page exclusivity for 30 days, which was very good for us. And while I was there, he called Prince Al Walid, because he was his partner 50%. Got his blessing to do the deal, and that's how we ended up buying the Plaza Hotel.
That's a great story. Wow. You really went very far for this one.
Yeah. By the way, interesting enough, about I would say few months after I closed the deal, I got a call from a representative of Prince Al Walid, saying that he's coming to New York and he wants to meet with me. So I went to a meeting. I was alone. I came alone. He's surrounded by 20 advisors, very smart people, and we had a really lovely 1 hour meeting. And towards the end of the meeting, he said, I want to come back and I want to be your partner. which was for me amazing for many, many different things. And we created a partnership on a portion of the, because I converted it to a transit hotel, but really 5 star. The hotel before wasn't 5 star, residential and commercial. And he came back to portion of it, and it was fascinating on multiple levels, obviously.
So, I mean, that property, that was a big turning point in your career. Um, Eventually, you decided to create the Naftali Group. What led to that creation?
So look, I did so much in between 2000 to 2007, 2008. Basically, when in by 2007, what started with 2 rooms in Fort Lee, New Jersey, became a group. I was a 49% partner in the development company, while I was the CEO of the group level. And so we had an asset value. We had assets in 12 states in the US, in Canada, in Toronto, Montreal, and Quebec City. And I was doing developments as far as Singapore because the same Queckling Bank invited me to Singapore to co develop with them. And I co invest with them on 2 deals there. And so the entire asset value after those 7 years, there was value at 7 billion across the continent, which was amazing, obviously. But we were running almost 24/7, and but then I got to a point that I said, look, I mean, my deal there wasn't great financially for me, and I found myself also um, taking a half of the portfolio in Canada public. So I went through an IPO. I became, among other things, I continued to be the CEO of the development company and the CEO of the group, but I became the chairman of the Canadian entity. I took it public, and as a chairman, I started to deal with what I believe is not real estate. It's more dealing with regulators and analysts and all of that. And I lost the passion. I'm really passionate about creating things and developing things, and that's my passion. My passion. And so I said I'm done. But then we started to see the financial crisis, and I couldn't leave during the financial crisis. So it took me 3 years to leave between 2008 to 2011, because I couldn't. I was like a quarterback. I couldn't just leave, or at least morally, I couldn't feel that I can leave everything. So I stayed there for 3 years, and it was a plan to kind of how to step out in 3 years. Day after I left, I formed the Naftali Group, and immediately I got the support of all the lenders that worked with me before. They said, Miki, we are just go, and we trust you. We just go and do what you know to do, and that's so very quickly. Now with the Naftali Group, I said, okay, I'm not going to control the world. I'm not going to be in 12 states in the US. I'm not going to be in Canada. I'm not going to be. And by the way, before that, I forgot to mention I was also a chairman. Among other things, I took a position as a chairman of a European real estate company. I didn't do much, but I was running the quarterly board meetings and things like that. So, I was all over the place. Everything was great. It was also a different age for me, a different phase of my life. And I said, when I'm looking at everything that I did, everything was great. But market, the best real estate market, if you really know what you're doing and you know how to time it right, is New York City. And the second best is to focus on the east coast of the US. I don't need to be everywhere. It's big enough. It's huge. And it's very difficult to, if you don't know what you're doing there, most people are failing. So we focus for the first 10 years on New York City. We did a lot. We started small. We grew, 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 grew. We did, we're doing a lot, millions of square feet. And then I said, okay, now I feel comfortable to expand to South Florida, which wasn't new for us. But after 10 years of focusing on New York, we said, okay, time to expand to South Florida. And in addition to that, expand not only focusing on buying and developing properties, but also lending money to other developers, because we saw that the credit market became very tight, and a lot of small to mid-sized developers and investors had a lot of issues to get financing. So that's what we have. The Naftali Group today has two major kind of arms. One is the development investment, and we're doing a lot. And the second one is the debt business, we are of which we're lending money to other developers.
I think it cut out for a second, but I got it. So, I mean, you decided to focus on New York City real estate. There's a lot of different people in New York. How did you carve out your own niche in the city and figure out what you were going to do different? Was it just looking at places that were just overlooked before and getting them and then converting them? And then what made you like? What did you figure out was was the potential of Miami real or just South Florida real estate? Like when did you realize it was the right time to make a move there?
Right. So specifically about New York, I mean, look, I'm doing it for 24 years. The philosophy of the company, which is basically based on my personality, is no bullshit, no smoking mirrors. We work hard. We are not perfect, but every time we want to do better, and every time we want to do better. And development and construction is never perfect. You're not building an iPhone, but you try to do the best that you can, and we master our trade. We are, I think today this is not about, okay, I'm sitting here and I'm saying something, or I'm going on whatever Bloomberg or CNBC or whatever. This is about reality. We did so many projects. Our projects are well received. People see them not only in a beautiful rendering at day one, but they see when we complete them. And they're well received because we really, really care. We really care about every detail. And we spend thousands of hours to to make them as perfect as possible. So our, if you want to call it niche, is our niche. It's really not a niche. It just do the best that we can, and really not just talking about it, but really do it. And through hard work, and keep learning, and keep pushing the envelope, and keep listening to the market, to buyers, to renters, what they want, not what I want, not what the architect want, not what the interior designer want, not what my brokers want, what the buyers and renters want, listening to them and catering to the demand. That's how that's what I believe, that's why we are successful. And how do we measure success? Success is by the demand. Our projects are sold out before, each one of them, in the take the last 10 years, sold out before we complete them. Our rental buildings are at high occupancy, so it means that the clients, the buyers, the residents, they like our product. You create a product, so you need to make sure that, by the way, not only in real estate, you create a product, you need to create it for a market. So if you listen to the market and you really try to understand the demand, and you cater to the demand, I think that this is the what it's all, that's the path to success. Now, going back to South Florida, wasn't necessarily the perfect timing. It was okay. What we saw is during COVID, a lot. Florida is for many years is a place of immigrants moving to Florida from whatever. But it was, from the East Coast. It's cold. You go to retirement. You move to a better weather and all of that. And obviously it became, now it's Miami, for example, is a city that offer everything, absolutely everything. But the point is, the one thing that we saw is missing, in our opinion, is quality. quality of product. There are a lot of developers in South Florida. There are some really great developers, very smart, but there are a lot of other developers that are not qualified. They would never ever be able to be successful in New York City because New York City is a very demanding market. Buyers and renters are very sophisticated. They know what they want. So you cannot cut corners in New York City unless it's in a cycle that everything is selling. But in order to play here for a long term, you have to do a really good job. And we realized that there is a real demand for quality because all of the sudden there are buyers that they either buy, they're not, Miami is now a choice. They can either buy in New York, they can either buy in Miami, they can buy in Beverly Hills, they can buy in London, they can buy in Paris. It's not like this cheap place that they just spend a couple months in the winter. Now it's expensive. And now you have the best restaurants over there. Now you have the best entertainment and sport and all that. So the point is, quality it was missing there. And we said, okay, we think that we can introduce our quality and our sense of every detail that we spend so much time. And that's why we decided to go back to the South Florida market, and we are doing two mega projects there.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, you're definitely right about the aspect of them. Just there's just a ton of developers here that wouldn't have made it in other places, and that quality is really needed. Just the last question I have, and a quick answer. What do you aspire to do now? What are some of your goals that you have, things you want to achieve that you haven't achieved yet?
Um, it's really not for us. It's not. We're not growing for the sake of growing. For us, it's about focusing on the right opportunities, making sure that we think also about the downside, making sure that if the cycle is changing, we are protected, and try to to build quality projects, quality buildings. If we can help in our small, if we can contribute in a small way to the success of New York City, to the success of Miami, to the success of South Florida, and bring really quality, well received buildings to those cities, we'll be very happy. We'll do our small contribution to those cities.
Well, thanks for coming on. I appreciate you taking the time and doing this. I think you've already done a lot for New York City and in Miami and South Florida as well. You're doing a lot currently, so I'm excited to see the impact of that and wish you much success. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.